Hello everyone, I hope you guys are doing well, and a special shout out to the May 25 students who did not get the results that they were hoping for yesterday. I know it is a bit painful, and I really hope that you've got some time to let that sink in and process what has just happened. Now, this video is an overall guidance video for every student who is thinking on whether they want to do two groups or one group. If one group, which of the group? And if I have to do two groups or both groups or one group, what should be my study plan and strategy? So this is an overall guidance video specifically for FR and AFM. We'll give a separate video, but this is for an overall guidance because this is for the first time that you have such a short span of time. In every other attempt, a student would have typically 3.5 to 4 months. Now you are operating on a much more compressed time scale, less than 2 months to be precise. If you start studying tomorrow, let us say from 8th of July, you'll have 55 days. The later you do, maybe lesser days. Again, I'm not forcing you to start tomorrow, but earlier the better. Preferably over the course of this week, you should start your preparations. But few important questions that you want to kind of get done and dusted because you don't want to procrastinate and spend a lot of time on those areas. First, should I give one group, both groups, or if one, which of the one? Now again, different student has a different psyche and a different mindset. I'm giving you a general thumb rule, which what I would have done if I would have written the exam, and from my past experience, generally I would look at a range of around 15%. 10% to be conservative, but maximum 15% from the passing score. So let us say the passing score is 300 minus 15%, it comes to around 255. So if you have scored less than 255, I would say that in 1.5 odd months to kind of cover that kind of ground is a little difficult. I'm not saying you cannot do it, but it is a little difficult. So if it is less than 255, if I have to drop a cutoff line in my mind, I would say I would go for one group. If I'm above 255, I am in striking distance of the passing score. If I put in a lot of efforts, I can go with two groups as well. So this is my threshold. Again, I'm saying that a different student might have a different guidance, but with the timelines at play, this would be a good decision point for you. Now again, the next question is which of the two groups. If I decide to go for one of the groups, typically that will be the group I'm usually stronger at, and over here if I'm good in one of the groups, I have relatively lesser time. I can work on that a lot better and kind of get done with that. Then in January, I will have a lot more time to prepare for it. Typically, I will go for group one if I'm equally prepared for both the groups, because then I'll have a relatively lesser time now. And then in the second, when I'm going in when I'm going for IBS in, let us say, January, I'll have the entire FR, AFM, etc. done. Otherwise, in this 1.5 months, I also have to manage this FR, AFM and audit if I'm giving just group 2. But again, that is my decision criteria. Now, for a lot of subjects, again, amendments is a question in your mind. Now, at least for FR and AFM, there are absolutely no amendments. If you have taken the material for May 2025, you can safely continue with that material. There is absolutely no changes. If you have taken from whichever faculty, whatever batches you would have taken after that, I mean, at least if I were to give our example, we would have shared the new sums added, PDF as well as videos on your Google Drive, and you can refer that. The same continues to remain even for your September 25 exams. Now, for other subjects like DT, etc., the Finance Act remains the same, but there can be other possible changes. So it's best if you speak to your subject matter faculty and they will be able to guide. But in FR and AFM, you don't really need to bother a lot. If you have covered for May 25, including whatever were the changes applicable for May 25, the same will continue for your September exams. Again, a doubt also comes in the minds of students that rather than doing all of this, should we shift to the Jan 26 attempt together? I would say that rather than shifting both the groups together for Jan 26, might as well give one group right now, ease up the burden and make Jan 26 much more manageable. That is what I would have done. But again, if you want to give both the groups together with complete diligent preparation, 1.5 months is not as sufficient. If you are less than 255, then you will might as well have to look at Jan 26. But if you take September 25, stick to it. Don't keep on wavering in the middle. Okay, then how do you cover everything in the span of time that is 55 days if you are giving both groups, group 1 and group 2? And this is the most important thing. Now, even if you have the time that you have, remember you have to optimize on it. Like when we gave the exam, all the 8 papers that were there were together. We did not have 1.5 days. We had every day an exam would come and people would manage with the time that is available. Now we have 1.5 days, even that is short. So I'm saying that your work will expand to the available time. So don't really freak out about having about 2 odd months. There are 2 months. Keep that in your mind and let us try to optimize the best we can do in those 55 days to be precise, or at least around 50 days depending on when you start. So over here, if I'm giving both the groups, I will still want to do 2 revisions. Now I'm stretched for time and hence my revisions have to be relatively faster, but I will still try to do 2 revisions. Now when I look at a subject like FR, I will take 8 days for FR in my first revision right now. I know it's a little less, but again with the time that you have, you'll have to play around 8, maximum 9 days. Now the second revision for FR, I'll directly do pre-exam. I'll not really invest another time in the middle because I'll have to spend 5 days before the exam. If required over here, instead of 5, you can put 6 days. But you cannot do 3 revisions in FR if you're giving both groups. For AFM, 7 plus 4, that is around 11 days. And for audit, 5 plus 3, that is 8 days. Now audit papers over the last 2 to 3 attempts have been fairly nasty, and from whoever we speak who have kind of done reasonably well in audit, the general feedback we get is they did some part of audit on a daily basis. I'm not saying that you spend 355 hours daily, but maybe apart from these 5 plus 3 days that you have allocated for audit, because a lot of students we have seen, at least in this attempt and last attempt, have faced difficulty in audit, you might as well allocate a little more on a daily basis, maybe an hour, maybe doing an essay on a daily basis or something like that, other than, or some ethical professional ethics or their clauses on a daily basis. Maybe will keep that refreshed in your mind. Again, what to do, your audit faculty or your subject matter expert will guide you the best. In fact, you yourself will have a very good view. But I would suggest that other than the 5 plus 3 uninterrupted revisions that you're doing, 5 plus 3 days, I would recommend that you spend some hour, even if it is half an hour, some time for audit on a daily basis. It will be a break from your practical papers as well, and at the same time it will help you cope up with this subject which is haunting a lot of students these days. Okay, so this is close to around 33 odd days, I believe, 32 or 33 days for your group 1. Now when I go to the second group, over here if I'm giving both groups, I have an advantage in IBS. I don't have to separately prepare. Like if I give group 2 only, I've allocated a lot more time to IBS. But if I'm giving both the groups, I have an advantage that when I do 2 revisions of my core 5 papers, my IBS, in a way, I know the sums and papers have been quite out of the box, but by merely allocating days for IBS revision, you will not be able to do it. You will need to prepare for your core 5 subjects properly. Other than that, costing and law, which had a reasonable weightage again in your exams of at least May 25, you will need to allocate some time. So I'm giving you around 3 days overall. Over here, you can just glance around 1.5 days each for audit and law. Now you might for costing and law. Now you might say that is very less time, but remember you are preparing for only 15 marks. You're not preparing for 100 marks. At max, you'll get 15 to 20 marks max in an open book for costing, in an open book for law. Now you can't allocate 8 and 10 days for that, right? You have to do that cost benefit analysis. So around 3 to 4 days max for doing costing and law overall. And over here you need to kind of map up stuff in the material that you're referring, so that on the exam day in an open book, if a case comes, you can look at that relevant material and maybe address that issue properly. So this is regarding both groups for DT 8 plus 4 and for IDT 5 plus 3. Now your eyes might pop out that 8 plus 4 for DT, 8 plus 5 for FR. Isn't that too less? But if you allocate more time, then you're doing just 1 revision. And if you have given a CA final exam, you know that 1 revision, you're not going to remember and retain a lot of stuff. So maybe doing 2 quick revisions are always better than just focusing on 1, maybe a slightly stronger revision. So maybe doing 2 revisions is the strategy I will certainly go for. And this is a slightly tight and a compressed timeline, but try to stick to this. If you eat up a little more time in your first revision, it will cut down from your second revision, but ensure that your deviation is not more than a day in a subject. I mean, if you have 8, don't stretch it to 12 days. Typically, we suggest that FR will take 12 days for your first revision, but again, you have done FR earlier, you have done AFM earlier, so you can kind of press the pedal a little more and focus on your preparation. If possible, you can write 1 mock exam for a full portion, and that is sufficient. Beyond that, you don't really have a lot of time to do more than that. Okay, then when you go to a student who is giving just one group, now this student, if you are giving more than one group, I mean if you're giving one group, you have a decent amount of time to kind of polish that group. So let us assume you're going with group 1, in which case I've typically given you approximately 50% more time in your first as well as in the second revision. Like in FR, you'll have 12 plus 8 days, which is a reasonably good time. And over and above that, you'll have another 5 days on the pre-exam basis. So that's a reasonably good time to cover up your FR and strengthen it fairly well. For AFM, 10 plus 7 days. And for audit, around 8 plus 5 days. So around 30 to 50% more time given per revision, depending on the length of the subject. Again, you can tinker around over here depending on what is your strength and weakness. But again, in audit, try to practice on a daily basis. So even over here, 2 revisions is sufficient. In 1.5 months, don't really rush for the third revision, because, well, you have reasonable amount of time and 2 revisions do the trick for most of them, and hence 2 better revisions would be your strategy if you're giving group 1. Now when you're doing group 2, the strategy needs a bit of tinkering, because you need to spend some time for IBS. So over here for DT, 12 plus 8, that is 20 days plus 5 days pre-exam. So over here you'll have 55 plus 5, that is around 60 days, because group 1 time has gone. So your exams effectively start by around 8th or so of September. So you'll have a little more time, close to around 2 months, but I'll allocate those 5 more days for the last revision, pre-exam revision for your direct tax. So 12 plus 8 and another 5 days that you can have pre-exam for your DT. IDT would be around 10 plus 7, and then for IBS you need to put in some effort, because you can score really well in DT and IDT, but you still have to manage IBS. And over here you have FR, AFM and audit. Like we allocated close to 1.5 days for costing and law earlier. If I was only a group 1 student, I'll try to allocate. I know it is a little less, but think of it, 1.5 days. You can look at revision videos, marathon videos, whatever it is, but 1.5 days, and you try to cover FR, 1.5 days AFM, around a day or so of audit, around a day or so of costing and law, and that is 10 days, let us say, for IBS in the first go, and around 7 days in the second go. But don't just, you don't need to do DT and IDT again, but you need to touch up on the other subjects as well, because that is something that you need to be fresh about. So this is, in my opinion, your strategy for both groups, single group, whichever you decide. And I'll share this on my Telegram channel as well, this page, so you can kind of take a printout and maybe tinker around that if you think plus or minus 1 or 2 days, I think, depending on your preparation, but not more than that. 2 revisions, whether you're giving 2 groups or 1 group, just that the timelines would be different depending on the time that you have. Okay, now another thing is something that hits our mind, that, well, we studied everything. I don't think what I can do different in the last 1.5 months or 2 months that I have, that I did not do in the earlier attempt. Now, first of all, I know this will not sound pleasant to you, but you try to take that out of your mind. Try to have a learner's mindset and try to tell yourself that, okay, I know I gave my best, but there can still be the areas of improvement. The best athletes in the world, they are the best, but they still practice. So I'm not saying that you have not put in your efforts, you have, but maybe you need to push it up a little, push it up a notch. So first, having that learner's mindset is very important, that, okay, I need to improve a little. And if you do that, that frame of mind will really help you navigate. I know this, to get into that right frame of mind in the first week or so is going to be very difficult. So, well, accept what has happened and say that, well, it is just kind of a speed breaker. I'm just going to achieve my goals in the next attempt, and I need to focus on the areas of improvement. In my opinion, you see where you thought you lost your marks. If, let us say, you made a lot of silly mistakes that you realize, that means you need a little more writing practice. So while you are revising, ensure that you have writing practice and you have attention to detail. You try to write a mock paper more to ensure that you don't make that silly mistake. If you have a conceptual flaw, if you are blanking out in the paper and you are unable to think through adjustments which were slightly different, now institute may not ask you the exact same question, but if your adjustments were slightly different and you are unable to address it, that maybe you have a conceptual gap, in which case you might try to plug it up by, let us say, thinking a little more about the adjustments, thinking about the varieties of what will happen if this data was not given or if this data was separately given. That will be really helpful. And referring more material, unless you thought that what you referred earlier, irrespective of which subject, was inadequate in terms of, see, there's one thing that what came in the exam you could not answer, in which case the material was probably lacking. It was completely new to you, or what it came, you recollected, I've seen this somewhere but I'm not able to solve, in which case your material is good enough. You don't need to switch the material, because switching the material is again changing your photographic memory that you have had, you've done multiple times. So sticking to your material, whichever you have done originally in the span of 1.5 months, is what I would prefer, unless you thought that the material that you referred was grossly lacking. That is when I will switch the material. Otherwise, I would prefer to continue with the material that I have and improvise on either my silly mistakes, my writing speed, where I left the marks, I could not complete the paper, or my conceptual gaps. This is where I would focus on the writing speed, avoiding silly mistakes, and plugging in my conceptual gaps. Okay, now should I do a self-study or do I need new lectures or books? Again, it depends on whether you thought that you lost a lot of your marks because you were weaker in your concepts, or you could not complete the paper, or you made a lot of silly mistakes. If you made a lot of silly mistakes or you could not complete the paper, changing a lecture and watching someone else's new lecture is not going to take you anywhere, because you need to plug in the time to improve your writing speed and avoid silly mistakes. But if you thought that you had a lot of conceptual gaps which you can try to plug in, then probably you can take a lecture. Again, over here you need to look at the time which is there. In such a case, whatever timelines over here are there, that when you're watching the lecture is along with that you will do your first revision. So lecture watching, and along with that the same day you do practice, that you will count as your first revision, and then second revision you will do separately. So for example, if you're giving one group and you're doing FR, then you will try to cover FR in around 12 to 13 days, and that would be your first revision. Okay, or you're doing AFM maybe 10 days, and you try to cover the AFM class in those 10 days, focusing more on the chapters where you think you were struggling. The easier chapters probably you can just skim through, or you can go through on your own. So you'll have to be a little selective even when you're watching the lecture, if you decide to watch the lecture. Having said that, if you're comfortable with the content, you thought that you don't have any conceptual gap, there's no need to go for any new lecture. Your self-study is going to take you, to be honest, on the other side. So your self-efforts are of utmost importance. And when you're looking at certain important areas, a student might say that I have done everything, I don't know where I can improve on, where can I get new sums. Typically, if you want to practice some new sums, maybe picking up the last 4 or 5 institute past exam papers and taking institute's exam questions. They will be same sums, just with different numbers and different names. But this will force you to think, and using that, probably you will be able to understand that, oh, this is where I am kind of making a mistake. So that can really help you. Again, if you have not been able to complete your papers, get that writing practice in place. Even if it takes time, try to write a lot of stuff, because you know stuff and you're not able to write 5 and 10 marks. Well, even if you are preparing very well, you again leave 5 to 10 marks, and that will be the, again, game changer. So writing practice. And if you want to practice some variety of sums in a chapter which you think you are struggling, like in business combination you pick up, or a consolidation, you pick up any random paper, for example of May 23, for example of May 22, and try to solve that sum, because that sum will be similar to a sum in the study material, but it will have different numbers and different names, which will force you to think. And if you do that on pen and paper, after you have done, let us say, your first proper revision, that can give you some confidence. But the most important thing is not the preparation, I would say. It is winning the battle with your mind. At this point, you are at the bottom, and the only way now is up. You can't go even further down in your mindset. So over here, you have to kind of get back, and the more you think and procrastinate, what has happened has happened. I agree, I empathize with you that it should not have happened. Maybe you deserved a little more marks, but what has happened has happened. You can give it for re-verification, revalidation, but as we say in accounts, you be prudent and conservative. You prepare as if you have to give all the subjects, and if you get a surprise, nothing like it. But the earlier you start, and trying to reset the mindset into a learner's mindset where you accept and proceed, because again, people have cleared. So we will also clear in the September students who have cleared, I'm sure I will see your name over there. And having that goal, having that positive mindset, people who are giving you those positive affirmations is very important. This is something which is well ignored. Everyone is focusing on the magic trick and the magic strategy. The magic trick is not there in these study plans or these strategies. These are just numbers. The magic trick is in your mindset. If you can reset your mindset fairly well, and if you can kind of slowly tell yourself that, okay, this was a bad day. Even the best players, the best athletes in the world have bad days. Even they have to go up, wake up and go for the next match. And if they can make the next match count, no one remembers what happened earlier. And as a result, you have to ensure that this is just a temporary pause for you, and just get in that right mindset. Immerse yourself into preparation so that other distractions and other negative, let us say, things don't come into your way. Immerse yourself in your preparation. In any case, you have very limited time, so use that time judiciously and make a decision. Don't keep on wavering till 15th and 20th of July on whether I want to go for one group or two groups. There's no right and wrong. What is most appropriate for you, you decide that, but you stick to it. Don't keep on changing. Otherwise, half of your time is going to go in deciding what is right and what is wrong. Again, for some students, they might have exemptions in one or two papers, in which case a little more time gets freed up. Again, then this plan will have to be modified a little, because I don't know which subjects you have exemption, and I hope you have a lot of exemptions, but then you can modify a plan a little, but ensure that you have 55 days in your hand, and you back calculate that 55 days I need, let us say, 2 revisions. Maybe 2/3 of the time will go in the first revision, 1/3 of the time will go in the second revision. With the subjects at hand, you will plan it accordingly. Okay? So I'll see you soon with more such videos, and I'll give you a separate guidance for FR and AFM if it is possible. I wish you all the very best, and keep studying, and good luck. God bless you all.